You're watching Beyond the Continent here on News Central Television. I am Judith Atibi. We'll begin the major headlines from Beyond the Continent, but this time in the Middle East, as Iran has launched missiles at a U.S. airbase in Qatar in response to strikes on its nuclear sites on Saturday. Qatar confirmed the attack on the US-run Al Udeid base, calling it a flagrant violation, and says it reserves the right to respond directly. The country has temporarily closed its airspace, and U.S. and U.K. citizens have been advised to shelter in place. In Washington, Donald Trump is attending a national security council meeting shortly after the White House earlier said he was simply raising a question and flouting the idea of regime change in Iran. Before the strikes, Iran's Armed Forces Chief of Staff Abdul Rahim Mousavi had vowed that the country would take firm action in response to U.S. strikes on key nuclear sites. Iran continues to promise retaliation for United States strikes on critical nuclear facilities as it launched a new wave of missiles and drones against Israel. Mousavi, in a short statement on Monday, said that the U.S. violated Iran's sovereignty when it attacked the Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan nuclear sites on Sunday and had entered the war clearly and directly.
این جنایت و حرمت شکنی بی پاسخ نخواهد ماند به فضل الهی. در برابر این خطای آمریکا هم متناسب با اقدام متجاوز قاطعانه اقدام خواهیم کرد.
Meanwhile, Israeli government spokesman David Manser said that their objective is not regime change in Iran. The country's military had said it launched air raids on Monday to block access to Iran's enriched uranium facility in Fordo, which was bombed by the United States at the weekend. A military statement said Israeli forces had struck in order to obstruct access routes to the Fordo enrichment site, which U.S. President Donald Trump said had been totally obliterated by the U.S. strikes.
The Iranian terror regime has fired around 500 missiles and over 1,000 UAVs at Israel's towns and villages and population centers. 24 people have been murdered here in Israel. 1,361 have been wounded, 14 seriously. 15,000 people, that is 15,000 people, have been evacuated from their homes that were damaged by Iranian ballistic missile fire. We've made very clear when it comes to Iran, our objective is not regime change, but that may be the byproduct, as happened in Syria, whereby Iran's people, who are not our enemies, who are victims of this Iranian regime, we believe that there is an opportunity now for them to throw off the fear which has been hoisted upon them by the Iranian regime, because we believe that Iran's regime are more scared of their own people than they are even.
And now for more on these, I'm joined by international correspondent Afia Hagen. Afia, tell us, what's the latest on the conflict between Iran and Israel and the subsequent airstrikes on Iran by the United States of America?
We have had that retaliation by Iran striking the Al Udeid air base in Qatar. Now, this air base had been evacuated a few days ago, so there was no injuries and no loss of life. 10 missiles were fired at the air base. So this is thought to be a largely symbolic attack, a largely symbolic measure by Iran. You know, they had earlier said that no attack would go unresponded to, that they would have their own response, that they said that they couldn't let what happened over the weekend with the US attacking their sites, they couldn't let it go. Now, the Qatari government have offered their strong condemnation of the attack on the base, saying that they consider it a flagrant violation of the sovereignty of the state of Qatar, its airbase, international law, and the United Nations Charter. Now, Iran insisting that this attack was not on Qatar, but on the United States, because it was all about hitting that airbase. Now, what happens now is the real question, isn't it? Because this attack is being seen as largely symbolic, perhaps that this is the wind down phase of this part of the conflict, but we just don't know.
And do we have any idea what Iran's next move will be?
And that's a really good question. So they have fired these 10 missiles at the Al Udeid airbase. They said they want to continue good relationship with Qatar. And this is not about hitting Qatar. And so it's now up to Washington, really. What will they do? There is that Security Council meeting going on at the moment in the White House. The kind of war cabinet, if you were, convening to decide what their next move will be. Perhaps this is a time where they will revert to diplomacy. You know, the US have done their strikes, Iran have done their retaliation. So what happens now? Had there been injuries or deaths, I think it could have been a different situation. It could have been seen as an escalation. But I actually don't think that it is, because it was a largely symbolic attack. Doesn't mean that it wasn't scary for people in Qatar who were told to shelter in place, people in Bahrain told to shelter in place as well. The airspace closed over Qatar doesn't minimize the fear factor that comes along with any kind of airstrike. But because there was no injuries or casualties, I think this remains largely symbolic. Will Trump see it that way? That's what the question now becomes. So how he will respond over the next few hours will determine where the course of this conflict goes. We know that Trump is very, very good at changing his mind. Only on Thursday, he said, I'm going to give Iran 2 weeks. 48 hours later, he was dropping bombs on Iran. So whatever he says now or decides now, of course, could change hours, minutes down the line. So we wait with bated breath to see what comes out of that security meeting.
I mean, is there a chance that we're seeing Iran blocking the Strait of Hormuz? Because we know that if this is blocked, if the Strait is blocked, it's going to have ripple effects on the world, seeing, you know, the inflation that we've seen after COVID-19 and just a soaring cost of living crisis that is felt across the world. The last thing we need is that blockade happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Strait of Hormuz, roughly 20% of the world's oil supplies go through this strait on a daily basis. So it's a very, very important trade route. Now, if Iran decides that it wants to block that trade route, you're very correct in saying that we will see prices going up. Oil, gas, all the rest of it. This cost of living crisis that we've been going through will look set to continue. Now, it's a credible scenario. We just don't know how likely it is. Iran says that it wants to do it. Trump obviously vehemently angry about that, saying, you know, putting on social media that prices should be kept down, that he's keeping an eye on that. But it is a tactic that Iran could use to get the result that they want, which would be the US backing down. Again, it remains to be seen what happens over the course of the next few days, the next few weeks. But it is a credible tactic that Iran could use. Whether they will or not is what we'll be looking for over the coming days.
Afia, I must say thank you so much for giving us all the insights and updates on these latest developments. Afia Hagen, our international correspondent, giving us those insights and update following the Iran-Israel airstrikes and the U.S. meddling with that. Let's go on a short break, shall we? When we come back, we head to the UK. After the break, stay with us. And off to Syria, where Syrian Ministry of Interior has condemned the bombing of the church, pointing to it as a suicide attack by the ISIS organization. The international community had condemned the attack, the first of its kind in the Syrian capital since Islamist-led forces toppled longtime ruler Bashar al-Assad in December. It was also the first time inside a church in Syria since the country's civil war erupted in 2011.
الداخلية السورية التفجير الإجرامي الآثم الذي استهدف كنيسة مار الياس اليوم، والذي تشير المعطيات الأولية إلى كونه ناتجا عن هجوم انتحاري يتبع تنظيم داعش. وهذه ليست المرة الأولى التي يحاول تنظيم داعش استهداف المدنيين بأعمال إجرامية فيها. فقد أحبطت وزارة الداخلية محاولتي تفجير في كل من مقام السيدة زينب وكنيسة معلولة في عمليات دقيقة ومعقدة. في وزارة الداخلية نعمل مع الجهات المعنية لكشف تفاصيل الحادثة، ونعكف على استكمال التحقيقات وجمع الأدلة لتحديد هوية المنفذ.
And ahead of NATO summit, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Monday received Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky for talks at 10 Downing Street. Zelensky's spokesman told reporters that the main purpose of the trip is to deepen defense cooperation. This comes after President Zelensky had lunch with King Charles at Windsor Castle after he arrived in London ahead of a NATO summit in The Hague. In addition to top-level meetings, Zelensky will also speak to Ukrainian military personnel undergoing training in the UK and think tank representatives. Still in the United Kingdom, protesters and police had a face-off at a rally in central London in support of campaign group Palestine Action. This comes after the country announced the group's ban after its activists broke into UK's largest Air Force base last week. British Interior Minister Yvette Cooper said the vandalism of 2 aeroplanes at RAF Breeze Norton in southern England was disgraceful, and the group had a, quote, long history of unacceptable criminal damage, end quote. Cooper said Palestine Action has committed acts of serious damage to property with the aim of progressing its political cause and influencing the government. NATO chief Mark Rutte on Monday said a new defense spending pledge to be announced at a summit in The Hague was fundamental for ensuring that the alliance can deter Russia. U.S. President Donald Trump has demanded that NATO allies commit to spending 5% of their GDP on defense at their 2-day gathering in The Hague starting on Tuesday. The focus at the summit in the Netherlands will be on keeping Trump happy after his return to power sparked fears that he could blow a hole in the 7-decade-old alliance. NATO's 32 allies have agreed to a compromise deal to dedicating at least 3.5% of GDP to core military needs by 2035 and 1.5% to broader security-related items.
The defense investment plan that allies will agree in The Hague introduces a new baseline, 5% of GDP to be invested in defense. This is a quantum leap that is ambitious, historic, and fundamental to securing our future. The new defense investment plan is the key deliverable for this summit and will be decisive when it comes to ensuring effective.
Canada and the European Union have officially signed a security and defense partnership at a joint summit in Brussels. The agreement commits Canada and Europe to collaboration on defense and is a step toward Canada participating in the continent's massive new defense procurement program known as Rearm Europe. Prime Minister Mark Carney, who traveled to Brussels for the Canada-EU summit, is pursuing more options for defense procurement. Carney met with European Council President Antonio Costa, and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen at the summit before the final deal was signed. And off to Russia, where Russian forces have now launched a ballistic missile strike on the city of Bihorod Dnistrovik in Ukraine's Odessa region, destroying an educational facility. According to the governor of Odessa, Ola Kipa, 2 people were killed and at least 12 others were injured, 3 of them critically. Rescue crews continue to clear the rubble where more people may still be trapped. President Zelensky said the missile hit a school. No children were in the building at the time of the strike. Only school staff were present as the school was empty of students due to holidays. Rescue operations continue amid fears that more may be trapped under the rubble. A French woman is back on trial for killing her 95-year-old grandfather by setting fire to his bed. Previously given a 5-year sentence, or suspended sentence, Emily G. now faces an appeal in Bourg-en-Bresse, eastern France, with the public prosecutor seeking a new judgment. The defense lawyer maintains his client carried out an act of love to end her father's suffering. The 95-year-old victim was found dead from severe burns and smoke inhalation, in his bed in August of 2020.
C'est le procureur de la République qui a interjeté appel. C'est-à-dire que nous ne sommes pas en demande aujourd'hui. Nous allons voir ce que le procureur souhaite. Cependant, elle est bien sûr consciente des enjeux. Elle est aussi consciente de cette histoire de vie. Elle la vit, c'est-à-dire que c'est d'abord l'histoire de son grand-père et du décès de son grand-père, ce dossier. Donc elle est consciente de tout ça, elle est extrêmement préoccupée, extrêmement concernée, extrêmement stressée, on peut le comprendre. Ce procès, il est à la fois nouveau parce que le principe de l'oralité fait qu'on recommence à zéro. On ne fera référence à aucun des premiers éléments de première instance. Mais nous, on l'a vécu par contre la première instance. C'est la même accusée, c'est le même procureur de la République, avocat général, et c'est la même défense. Donc on est bien conscient des enjeux de ce procès, de la dureté d'un procès, de ce qui va se dire. On est aussi conscient que chaque procès d'assises est nouveau. Il se passe toujours des choses. En assises, on en apprend toujours, et c'est tout l'intérêt des assises, c'est tout l'attachement de la défense à cette institution qu'est la Cour d'assises. On l'a dit, on l'a toujours dit, on n'est absolument pas dans une position militante aujourd'hui. C'est-à-dire que ma cliente, elle a fait face comme elle pouvait à une situation dramatique. On n'est pas du tout dans un militantisme de l'euthanasie. Par contre, oui, force est de constater qu'on est effectivement dans un cas d'euthanasie, d'une famille qui a fait comme elle pouvait, face à une situation désespérée, avec pas forcément les bonnes solutions. Hein. On n'est pas là pour prêcher aujourd'hui. On est là pour s'expliquer pleinement et faire face à ses responsabilités.
The Bangladesh court on Monday remanded in custody the former elections chief for his alleged role in rigging the vote in favor of now oust autocrat Sheikh Hasina. KM Nurul Huda, who is now 77, was ordered to be detained for 4 days while questioning continues. On Sunday, the powerful Bangladesh Nationalist Party filed a case against Huda and other former election commissioners it accuses of rigging past polls in favor of Hasina, whose 15 years in power ended in a mass uprising in August of 2024. Now, hours after the case was filed, a mob stormed Huda's home in the capital, Dhaka, and dragged him onto the street. The interim government condemned the incident and urged people not to take the law into their own hands. And off to South America, where over 50 Colombian soldiers have been detained by residents in guerrilla-controlled region. According to General Federico Mejia of the Colombian Army, the soldiers are currently being deprived of their freedom by residents in a southwestern region of Colombia where guerrilla groups are active. According to the military, a first platoon of troops was carrying out an operation in El Tambo, a municipality in the conflict-ridden Nikkei Caño region, when civilians stopped and detained them.
Y a la misma muerte, donde están en este momento privados de su libertad, prácticamente secuestrados por aquellos que están infiltrados dentro de la multitud, por un grupo de 200 personas aproximadamente. Dicen que debemos abandonar el casco urbano y aparentemente en las próximas horas nos llevarán o nos van a conducir hacia un sector allá en el Plateado o en el sector de Argelia, a donde tengamos que llegar. Ya estamos acostumbrados a esto y por eso no vamos a resistir. O sea, esto no se va a acabar, ese acompañamiento que tiene la fuerza pública ya con esta población. Lo que realmente nos encontramos en una nacional que ha perdido espacio y control territorial. A esos que le tienen miedo y por eso están infiltrando las comunidades, obligándolas y si no acceden a sus peticiones, al destierro y a la misma muerte.
And that's all we can take from beyond the continent. Now, do remember that you can send us your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number now showing on the screen. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on social media. We're at News Central TV on all social media platforms. You can always watch News Central live on 5 platforms. The very first is DSTV channel 422. If you have Go TV, you're in luck. Find us on channel 23. We're also on Star Times channel 274. Download the Avo app, Avo TV, on your smart TV, and you can watch us there. But better yet, you can stream us live 24/7 on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Judith, the TV. Good night.